Tymna Kraum currently have 1,117 total tournament entries. If you've been watching my YouTube channel, you might have noticed that I'm making deck tech videos and tutorials about commanders looking into tournament statistics and data, how they have basically been performing. And we finally reached a sample size that is enormous, 1,000. That's great. So suddenly we can actually say some really strong claims. To begin with, that win rate up there from those 1,117 tournament entries is 27.53. So it's a very strong indicator that this commander pair is performing great. And in other words, if you're picking up this commander pair, bringing it into a tournament, your win rate in that tournament should probably look something around that value, give and take. To put things into perspective, let's look at some other really popular commanders. We have Kinnan on 757, so we're actually reaching there. We're soon going to have 1,000 tournament entries with Kinnan as well, sitting on an average win rate of 22.84. Tivit is also another really popular commander with 597 different tournament entries with an average win rate of 23.38. Yuriko, the Tiger Shadow, is also quite popular, give and take, 282 tournament entries with an average win rate of 19.51. Nayela the Blade Blossom with 526 tournament entries, a win rate of 24.26. Sisei with 478 tournament entries so far with an average win rate of 26.84. And the last one I thought was gonna look at is Atraxa Grand Unifier at 370 tournament entries with a win rate of 22.95. So that should give you a from a perspective of how good Tymna Kraum currently stands in a small showcased leaderboard. I usually make a video once each year to just showcase a complete commander tier list, looking into every single one of them. But in these deck tech videos, I like to just showcase the most popular ones, the ones we have most sample size on, to give a small indicator of how things are looking in a smaller scale at the current moment. And as you can see among the commanders we currently looked at, Tymna Kraum is performing better. But that takes us to the next step, where we're gonna look into specific card choices. Going over a few key ones. So what you're seeing right here, just above my head, total decks are the total collective, similar to total decks, 1,117. Then we have a Dauntless Dismantler and a pie chart with green and red. You see the green in 19.2, that's the inclusion rate of how many decks have actually included that specific card, a total of play it 214. And the win rate is suddenly different. As you can see here, the average win rate 27.53. You can see that over there as well in a smaller text, but now the win rate in green is higher, indicating that the win rate of those 214 decks that did include that card is higher, indicating this is a recommended card. And we can do the opposite by looking at cards like this one, Dragon's Rage Channeler. Suddenly the win rate is in red, lower compared to the total average, indicating that decks that have included that specific card are performing a little bit weaker compared to all the other Tymna Kraum decks out there. What we want to have is a basically 50-50 split in the sample size. So what you see here is an inclusion rate of basically 10%. So the sample size isn't that great because we want to have, once again, a 50-50 split. However, now that we have 1,117 total tournament entries total, we still have a pretty good sample size because 10% of that is still 108. So even though it's looking like a very few and very small population among the Tymna Kraum are playing Displacer Kitten, we still have some good numbers from that. We also should mention that when the inclusion rate is really low, that is also an indicator that the card isn't really popular and aren't really performing, because player experience matters a lot too. And people who have been basically playing this have basically figured out that it's not really working that well, and they have basically starting to cut it from their decklist. Now the cards I have here are enormous to the count, so we're not gonna go over all of them. We're gonna go over key specific ones. But if you want to know the specific win rate of a specific card that I'm not showcasing inside this video, leave a comment below. And I will look into my data for the specific card you're specifically asking for and give you the answer. I promise in my own human capacity to fulfill this request to the best of my abilities. So let's begin by looking into combo cards like Ad Nauseam. So this one is actually in red. However, take a look at the actual win rate, 27.31, and next to that you see a minus 22 or minus 0.22. That's how much it actually has dropped. So it's not really affecting the win rate that much. And as you can see, the sample size is basically enormous, everyone is playing it, and it's still performing quite well. So the performance from this card is actually pretty amazing, but you don't have to play it. It seems like decks without it are performing kind of okay. We already looked at Displacer Kitten, which is also a form of combo card. Now, moving forward to the next one together with Displacer Kitten, usually Teferi. And as you can see here, the sample size is a little bit higher, so people are still playing Teferi even though they aren't including Displacer Kitten. Teferi normally not being a combo card, but I'm still showcasing it among the combo section just because it kinda combos with Displacer Kitten that we've already looked at. And as you can see, it's kinda performing okay, kinda. Fastest Oracle is basically an auto-include. If you actually take a more detailed look, there are two decks that accidentally didn't play it for some reason, and those decks just happen to have a accidental better win rate than the total average. So this is more or less an auto-include in my opinion. So even though the win rate is actually in red, this is just basically 100% inclusion rate, which means it's gonna get the average total win rate compared to the total average because it's an 100% inclusion rate. Same thing will be said about Underworld Breach. As you can see, there are 4 decks that did not include this card among all the Tymna Kraum decks out there. That is saying something about the Breach and Fastest Oracle, guys. You have other options to add NAS. Peer into the Abyss is doing a little bit of a weaker performance, but still doing quite okay, honestly. 26.43 from 114 decks total is still quite good. I personally view Mnemonic Betrayal as a form of win con. It's a little bit of a late game win con, because once people have basically tried to win, the graveyards have been fueled, you basically tutor from Mnemonic Betrayal, and boom, you assemble a victory from your opponent's graveyard basically. I've seen that happen quite often, and as you can see, it's very popular and it's still showcasing a good performance. The weaker version, Yawgmoth's Will, however, is showcasing less of a performance. You have suddenly a minus 4.85, kinda close to 5% drop, taking it down to 22.68 with a really low sample size, indicating that this is probably not a recommended card. Wheels have been a hot topic. Wheel of Fortune is heavily included and is showcasing a good performance, or basically a similar value to the average win rate. Time Twister, basically the same, even though the sample size is still smaller. Windfall, however, seems to be making it drop a tiny bit. In the end, it's a little bit weaker compared to a Wheel of Fortune. But also, when you're playing this, you're probably playing the other two first. So what you could see here is that the amount of wheels might not be up to the total. You can evaluate these numbers a little bit differently, like why is Windfall tiny bit smaller compared to Wheel of Fortune, but once again, the difference isn't that much. Having Windfall inside the deck probably don't affect your win rate that much, if I'm gonna be honest. Like, the cards you want to find are the cards that is looking basically like this, when the win rate drastically drops down to the average win rate of other commanders we looked at in the beginning of the video. And that is why it's important to take a look at the other commanders in the beginning of the video to gain some perspective before you start looking at these cards and try to understand what these values actually mean. Because that 26.34 is still better than a lot of the different commanders we looked at in the beginning of the video. Wheels usually work pretty good with various combos, but they also function as a big card draw effect. But let's transition over to value engines. The One Ring, here we have that perfect 50-50 split, and as you can see, the win rate hasn't basically changed that much. It's actually dropped by 0.5%, but still it's still a very good win rate, in showcasing that, yeah, this card is doing good. The same will basically be said about Talion. currently sitting on 290 tournament entries and an average win rate of 26.83, which is minus 0.7 win rate compared to the total average, so still pretty good. This actually makes me want to showcase Talion's specific win rate. So this is looking at the performance when Talion is the specific commander. We have less entries of Talion as a commander compared to Tymna Kraum entering into tournaments with Talion inside the 99, and the win rate is drastically different. So we have a win rate of 16.67. Oh, this actually brings up the draw rate. So look at the average draw rate, let's actually go 22%. And then look here, you also have the average draw rate specifically on those 290 decks, including Talion inside the 99, of 16.06. So the small takeaway here is that Talion is probably great inside your 99, but probably not so good as a commander. There could be several reasons because of this. We're not gonna delve into that, specifically why Talion might be struggling as a commander. That's for a different video, a deck tech for Talion. But I just wanna showcase this because we're touching Talion for the inside the 99 option. So just because Talion isn't performing great in tournaments, it's still something that could be great inside your 99. Remember that. Heuristic study, auto include, 100% inclusion rate basically. Mystic Remora, basically the same. One deck did not include it, and that's weird, but there you go. Ledger Shredder is not actually a card draw value engine, it's more of a card filterer. Well, it's going to fuel your breach, and that is good. And, well, the win rate is still pretty good considering, but I think here the win rate is being boosted by other factors, other cards. I mean, it's a 100 card singleton. The impact of like including Ledger Shredder inside the deck isn't gonna be that huge, but it's still showcasing a small effect to it. In the end, this video is showcasing difference by like 1 to 2 to 4%, so it's not huge. But it is something. Also, I want to mention this, I'm usually making a lot of these videos looking into various different commanders, and whenever I'm looking into Ledger Shredder into one of these other deck tech videos for other commanders, I'm usually seeing a small drop. Not as, well, this is still kind of high compared to what the other commanders are getting, but that is because this is inside a really good functional deck. Still though, Ledger Shredder doesn't seem to be a recommended thing. Lofo, on the other hand, is sitting on a 28% average win rate, very high inclusion rate, pretty much around the same average, but it seems to be doing a good job. It's not dragging your win rate down at the very least. This one is doing that small micro drop by 2% basically. Grim Hireling sitting on 25.44, a kind of popular card. 72 decks have actually played it. It's something you see more action inside than Yellow the Blade Blossom, but this is definitely something you can play inside Tymna Kraum too, because once again, Tymna wanna go to combat, Kraum is flying with haste, so you can actually get some triggers from this thing. It doesn't seem to be like a terrible card, but it looks like other cards are performing a little bit better compared to this in the end. Like this one. This is not really a value engine, this is just a ritual and a huge card draw effect. Yes, Gus will. Average win rate 28.18, 0.65, played by 112 decks total. Seems to be doing good. This is a very popular card inside Tymna and Tana when you want to go for like more Tymna triggers, because this is creating top tiers that you can attack with and generate card draw with Tymna. So you have 101 decks that have actually played this. Once again, we have a really high sample size. We're starting to say things even among the not so popular cards. But still, this is not showing a great performance. Still, it's actually showing a pretty good performance, but I think that the win rate here is pretty high, just because the commander pair is still pretty good. Still, you're seeing a drop by 3.59. Fairy Mastermind is kinda popular. You have a 28% inclusion rate and a 28.02 average win rate, so it's doing some kind of good job if you compare it to like Ledger Shredder and some of the other value engines that we've looked at. Archivist of Ogma is also doing pretty okay. This is a good stable functional win rate, 27.13. That takes us to Stacks. Not something Tymna Kraum is very famous for. They're usually more of a mid-range kind of style or a turbo variant that is going for fast Adnos, Under Breach, fast as consult victories. But the thing here is that this doesn't specifically affect you, it's very similar to a Manglehorn for your opponents for only 2 mana. Boromir is also doing a very good job. I want to point something out though, by the way, that Boromir kind of functions like a pseudo Grand Abolisher. Similar to a Lavinia Azorius Renegade that is also sitting on a pretty okay win rate. Now here's an interesting take. As you can see, Lavinia's win rate is a little bit weaker compared to Boromir. What's the takeaway on that? Hard to say. But both of these creatures are actually making it hard for your opponents to cast spells during your turn if they can't pay mana for it. Sometimes they want to interact with the Pact of Negation, their Fierce Guardianship, their Mindbreak Trap, their Force of Negation, their Force of Will, Mental Misstep, etc. to stop you from winning. So they are not only attacking your opponents, they are also helping you in a special way. Compared to this, so Deafening Silence is played by 3 decks total, and all of those 3 decks haven't won a single game. Now the sample size is extremely tiny, but I'm trying to showcase that this is not a popular choice by Tymna Kraum players and probably not so recommended. Also usually when I'm looking into Deafening Silence on average other decks, it's not doing great, potentially indicating that stacks, strategies and such might not be the best go-to for this commander pair. You have probably better, more popular options. But a big takeaway here is that this is hurting you. Like winning with your Underworld Breach or your Adnos is gonna be tricky when that thing is in play, and that's kind of your key victory here. Then we have stacks cards that aren't affecting you, only affecting your opponents, but potentially a little bit weaker. Now some of you might say, what's the diff? I mean, this is having a great win rate and this is having a much lower win rate. This is a very high inclusion rate and this is a very low inclusion rate. Why are they different? Well, one is actually weaker and one is actually better. First off, this is an enchantment. This is going to fuel your dockside from your opponent. It's also going to generate a Mystic Remora trigger, but also it is easier to counterspell with various tricks. This is a creature, so Force of Negation won't really touch it. Also, you can actually sacrifice this to blow up all the artifacts in play if you need to for some specific reason. This is just sitting there. Daffy Voidwalker is showcasing a tiny drop by 2% basically. We also have that perfect 50-50 split, the one we're dreaming of, so we have 2 basically groups equal to the size, and we're seeing a difference. The sample size is enormous here, so we can clearly see that Daffy Voidwalker in general are performing a little bit weaker. Also, by the way, I've looked at other commanders. I have some experience looking into various different commanders with this kind of stuff. And I have noticed that in general, Daffy Voidwalker is usually dropping the average win rate by a tiny bit, indicating that it's probably good, it's only affecting your opponents, and that's a good stacks card. You don't want to have stacks cards that are affecting you, you want them to only attack your opponents. But if they are too weak, then still they aren't really doing the job enough. Orcus Bowmaster have proven to be very popular. It's played in a lot of decks. I think a lot of people really enjoy this kind of card. And it's showcasing a good performance. It's actually increasing the win rate by a micromillimeter. It's just on equal pairing to the average win rate in honesty. And I'm going to say the same about Opposition Agent. Basically it's the same as the total average win rate, but also if you take a look at it, the inclusion rate is close to 100, basically 96. So you have a very small group that didn't play it. That means it is going to get the same win rate as the total average in the end. Notion Thief, not as equally popular, but still showcasing a okay success rate. Professional Facebreaker is usually a pretty good card together with Tymna because it has Menace, so it's hard to block, but it also generates treasures that you can use once you're having a huge hand size with Tymna. But we have Power Creep, we have Ragavan Nimble Pilferer with an average win rate of 28.03, showcasing that it's probably a very recommended card inside Tymna Kraum. Also, by the way, as you can see, the population size here, the sample size, the inclusion rate, really high. 80% are basically playing this. Smothering Tide, not as equally popular, but still doing a kinda good job, I would say. The sample size is still pretty high, even though it's only 20% that are playing it. When it comes to interaction, you have Snap, pretty popular, pretty good. Red Elemental Blast, also really popular and also quite good. Ranger Captain Oeos, basically an auto-include. Snap Back, also good, and different option if you want more bounce effects. Miscast have apparently been dropping out of favor. I'm just guessing that there's a power creep concept here. We have 103 decks that have included miscast, and the win rate is definitely lower compared to the other counterspells we've looked at. I want to mention something here. So I've been calculating Tymna Kraum about a year, and some of the new cards that have come have increased Tymna Kraum a tiny bit. And Tymna Kraum have had a lower average win rate compared to when I started looking into it. So there is a possibility that Tymna Kraum have basically grown in power level, become stronger over time, and then cards that have been older, good, when they existed, are basically showing a win rate equal to what Tymna Kraum had back in the days. So once again, statistics is not everything. I do believe you're looking at an older win rate, so to say, an older average win rate of Tymna Kraum a year ago, or so to say. Still though, I mean, it still looks like it's not really recommended. Like, look at the sample size, look at the inclusion rate. People don't really pick this up inside the 99. And that's also an indicator. Player experience matters a lot. And apparently people are opting away from this card. Minor Break Trap, on the other hand, very popular. Mental Misstep, basically an auto-include. Oh, that's a big drop by 5% on Mana Drain. Yeah, I don't like this one. I don't think I play it in a single deck that I currently have. It's just too weak. Double blue is just too expensive. Gilded Drake it's an interaction. You're stealing an opponent's command or a key creature, and as you can see, it's not that popular, and the win rate is dropping a tiny bit by having it inside your 99, kinda. A big takeaway here, indicating that Gilded Drake not that huge here on the win rate, or it's still doing pretty good, but I think that is boosted by Tymna Kraum basically having a good performance overall in general. But the format isn't that heavy commander-centric, so to say. Force of Will, an auto-include. Force of Negation, basically an auto-include as well. Fierce Guardianship, also an auto-include. Dress Down, here we have that 50-50 split, and it's still doing a pretty good job. Fire Covenant, also a 50-50 split, and also it's doing a pretty good job. It's going to work out. Flusterstorm, basically an auto-include. This spell is showcasing a good performance. The win rate is dropping by half a win rate, so it doesn't really matter. It's still doing good. Delay is actually falling off in popularity. I can see that. I don't like it. It's too expensive. 2 mana is too much. Even though it's 1 pip colorless, 2 mana counterspells aren't good anymore. The win rate is not that terrible, but the popularity vote on this one is quite low. So 80 decks have totally played it, a total inclusion rate of 7.2%, but it's still showcasing a kinda decent job. It's not bad, so to say. It's just that your Adnos is gonna hurt a tiny bit from it. Psych Rift, basically auto-include, same win rate as the total average. And Offer, doing quite good. Before we wrap up this video, there's one more thing I would like to talk about and showcase that I think is really important. So what we're doing now is that we're looking at a collective of cards together, and then also excluding a few other cards. But I want to mention something very important. We're looking at the total collective of all decks, all tournament sample size, all different variations of commanders, even commanders that actually can't include these cards to begin with as well. This means we're getting a picture, not only looking into Tymna Kraum, but looking at like how these cards specifically are kind of performing regardless of whatever commander you're actually playing. So suddenly, this win rate here is being influenced by other Grixis commanders, so to say, like Inala, Kess and such. So what we have here are Adnas, Doxer Extortionist, Opposition Agent, Orcus Bowmaster, Fastest Oracle, and Underworld Breach. And you have a total of 554 decks that have included all of these 6 cards together. But we're also excluding the top 3 cards that are in black and white, Doffy Voidwalker and Gilded Drake and Talion. So those 554 decks have all of those 6 cards showcased in colors, but none of the black and white cards. And those are getting a win rate of 28.19. Now the win rate is in green. Below it you have a win rate without these cards. So all of the other, you can see up there 12,773 different tournament entries, they are getting without these cards, an average win rate of 21.66. So here you can see a clear difference, and also why Grixis is actually doing such a great job. And potentially why Tymna Kraum is winning so much is that they are playing these things. Like, all of these cards were close to all of these cards were auto included. But I think this is showcasing a good direction of where you probably should take your cEDH deck, so to say, towards. And we can look at a lot of different variations of things here, like here are 5 cards, but now we're excluding Displacer Kitten. This is interesting. So here we have Adnos, Dockside, Ristic Study, Fastest Oracle and Underworld Breach that we are including, but we're excluding Culling Ritual and Mnemonic Betrayal. Now first off, Tymna Kraum can't play Culling Ritual, but once again, we're looking at the entire sample size of all potential commanders and such. Mnemonic Betrayal is a card they can play though. And we did see a pretty much better win rate when we looked at all of these cards together, so I think Mnemonic Betrayal might be a recommended card, so to say, because when you're starting to exclude specific things and the win rate suddenly drops a lot, that's indicating that maybe you shouldn't exclude that card. So if we jump over to this picture, we have Opposition Agent, Orcish Bowmaster and Talion together, yay! But then we're excluding Ad Nauseam and Underworld Breach. We have 779 decks that have done this, and their average win rate is 21.63, but that's suddenly weaker compared to the potential total average. So this seems to be a not so recommended choice. You have a lot of Dimir decks that are basically doing this because they can't include Underworld Breach, so to say, but still maybe they should include Adnos. This might be a tiny bit of why Talion is not doing great, as we've looked at previously inside this video. This is also a very interesting one, not so popular. Now we're including Born Upon the Wind, Lightning Tutor, Final Fortune, Necropotence and Ristic Study. And we're excluding a few value engines like Braids and Talion here. Still, the win rate is pretty good, like 26.75. Showcasing the potential of Necropotence here, also including Enlightened Tutor and Final Fortune to basically being capable of tutoring for them. But we're not going to dig deeper than that, because once again the sample size is enormous and the amount of different potential cards we could actually look into is to the extreme. This video could get very long if we wanna dig that deep. But if you have specific questions around a specific card, once again, feel free to drop that question in the comments below of the video, and I will do my very best to try and answer that question. Also, if you wanna see a combination of specific cards, just write a list like, here, these 3 cards, what win rate do they have? Could you please tell me? And I will do my very best to try and answer that question. Don't promise that I will, but I promise that I will try. I got a lot of comments. What do you want from me? Still, I hope this video have been giving you some insight and potential ideas, but also very key here, directions of where you potentially should take this commander, but also maybe some inspiration of how you could also think otherwise. Regardless, thank you so much for watching and have a great day. I'll see you in the next video.